Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the West Fargo City Commission January 6th meeting. Please join me in a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening and welcome. First order of business is to approve the order of the agenda. Commissioner Simmons moves. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdovic seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the order of the agenda as presented. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item C, approval of the minutes of December 16th, 2019. The minutes have been distributed. They are in the packets.
I move we approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. It's been moved to approve the minutes as distributed. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdovic seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of December 16th, 2019. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next order of business, item D, building permits. The building permit information has been distributed. All commissioners, and it is in the packet. It is on the website. Any questions, Commissioner? We'll defer to Mr. Solberg.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Jurdovic. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Simmons seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the building permits as presented. The date on that building permit report is January 7th, 2020. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next order of business is a consent agenda. Items A through F. Again, they have been distributed.
I'll make the motion to approve the consent.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Thank you. Commissioner Thorstead seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda as presented. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I'd call on Mrs. Fisk. Do you have anything that you'd like to address with item F regarding the rollover of the vacation times? I know the requests are in. I'd like you as our top administrator to you're okay with it? You're fine with it?
Yes, I am. I had staff produce a list, and they gave me their reasoning, and it's basically for the one individual in the street department, it's just way too much work to do, couldn't get any time off with the shortage of employees and things going on. And the other ones, it's when they're doing training, they can't take time off. They're training other officers, so that just collected a little bit of time. So I signed off on it, and I feel
all right. Thank you. I just wanted a comment from our city administrator.
Mayor, can I make a comment?
Commissioner Simmons, please.
Thank you. Tina, are you aware, I guess, of anybody like in especially Public Works that have some overtime that they're going to lose because of this, and they may?
Nope, those are the only ones on that list that I was made aware of. And it's the supervisors have to bring it forward, and so my understanding is that's a complete list.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Moving forward, we're going to proceed with the regular agenda for the public's information. Items number 2 and number 5. Commissioner Thorstead will not be voting. He feels that he has a conflict of interest. Items 2 and 5, Commissioner Thorstead will recuse himself. First order of business on the regular agenda is The oath of office of Dan Fuller, West Fargo Fire Chief. Chief Fuller? Welcome this evening, Dan.
I, Daniel Fuller, of West Fargo, North Dakota, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of North Dakota, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of City of West Fargo Fire Chief according to the best of my ability, so help me God, under pain and penalties of perjury.
All the different types of calls that we got. And Dan and his team responded to 15 calls. 15 calls. There was a lady that was in serious distress. So along with Public Works, plowing their way in, and I'm sure West Fargo PD assisting and the like, and our EMTs and our EMSs and everybody there, 15 different calls for life-saving and assisting in providing care for the public and during the worst of the storm. So, again, my congratulations to you and your team, the Public Works, the PD, all of you interagencies that are working together. Marvelous job. So proud of you. Congratulations. Item number 2 on the regular agenda is the second reading of zoning ordinance amendments in section 4-400. Mr. Solberg.
Thank you, Your Honor. The second reading of zoning ordinance amendments. We did want to try to separate these, but however, we did have the first reading, so if you do have concerns with one or the other or both, you can certainly split that off and move forward with any part of this that you wish. I did place before you the written second reading. I want to point out on the downtown mixed use district, if you turn to page 11, I highlighted a portion of that ordinance. I want to make an addition onto there based on the comment during the first reading and public hearing, and that would be that we would add where it states that properties must be, or new construction must be 2 stories, or minimum 2 stories, that I would add in there that we would state also that where new construction is adjacent to 1 and 2 family zone property, the minimum setback from the 1 and 2 family zone property for the principal structure shall be increased to 20 feet for each additional floor above 35 feet. I think that would be a nice concession to ensure that as this might grow, if it grows beyond those properties that face Cheyenne Street, that they'd be compatible with any 1 and 2 family homes, either to the east or west or north or south. That's consistent language with other parts of our ordinance where you have multifamily near commercial or near, single family near commercial or near multifamily. So the proposed second reading of the entertainment mixed use district is unchanged. We've added also to the ordinance allowances for off-premise signage in the DMU and the EMU districts in our sign code, and also allowances for exceeding the current maximum size through conditional use, which is outlined in those district standards for both of those. We've also added a definition for heavy industrial uses pursuant to the previously noted change in the staff report at the first reading. So again, I just want to highlight we're looking at 2 districts, 2 new districts. They would, with part of that, we would remove the current Cheyenne Overlay District and the Main Avenue Overlay District. The other 2 parts are just changes that are associated with that. these are just creating districts. These are not actually zoning properties. I'll be talking about that in the next item for the zoning map. So these are just creating those zoning districts. And I also want to add too, parts of this moved a little faster than we would normally. Like, we have had a lot of conversation on this. We've had comp plan and overlay districts that have got us to this point. But just the fine tuning of it, I wouldn't be surprised if I'm back before you within a few months with potentially changes that might make it more consistent with how development is occurring, or maybe as we're regulating through these ordinances, might find some things that are a little difficult or maybe could be better, that we might come back with amendments. Again, anytime we create an ordinance, the commission has the ability to amend those ordinances at any time. So with that, I'm available for any questions, and John and his staff has also helped me a great deal on this as well. So
Thank you, Mr. Solberg. Commissioners, questions?
Mayor,
Mr. Simmons?
thank you. Tim, has all the stakeholders had a chance to look at your recent changes?
by stakeholders, you mean?
I just mean the
business community,
homeowners,
homeowners?
us, everybody, the people that plan on building down there?
Yeah, so a part of it is the rezoning. So when we actually look at rezoning these properties, and I'll talk to that in the next item, the actual district standards itself, I did meet with one of the residents from the Cheyenne area, and that addition that I added that I just spoke to was a direct result of some of his comments. And the development community, I mean, they've not had any concerns with this yet. I had talked to a couple of different people. We notified property owners, about 150 property owners related to the zoning map.
Okay.
And I spoke with a couple today, just business owners along Main, and their biggest concern was, is this good or bad for redevelopment? And in my mind, these aren't good, or they aren't bad for redevelopment because we already have the overlay districts in place here. These are probably more simplified versions of those overlay districts. I think it makes it easier to redevelop. Again, my whole idea on this is to simplify so it's easier to develop, so that a developer, homeowner, anybody knows up front what they need to do, rather than going through a design review committee or something like that. It's very clear, and that's our hope here. So although the 20-some pages I laid before you seem complicated, a big chunk in the front there is actually removing what's currently in place and replacing with what we think is a little bit more simplified version of ordinance. And we included diagrams too, so you can actually visualize what we're saying. And I think we'll get better at that too as we move along.
Thank you.
Additional questions for Mr. Solberg?
Just one quick question. You mentioned the off-premise signage. Can you expound on that? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, well, off-premise signs, what we often think of is billboards. The definition of off-premise, though, is really if it's on your property and advertising another business, it's an off-premise sign. So that's kind of how we have to regard it. There's a lot of legal issues as it relates to sign code throughout the United States, and our president and attorney know quite a bit about that. You have to be a little bit careful about being specific within your ordinance about what you allow and what you don't allow for speech. Free speech is protected very much so in our country, so which is wonderful. I guess the point is we allow it, but it's allowed as a conditional use. So you're going to review anything that comes before you within the entertainment mixed-use district or the downtown mixed-use district, and we'll not be looking at what the content of the sign is, but more so how big it is, what the structure looks like, things like that. So we control things like that. We control, is the lighting too intense, or is the flashing too repetitive, things like that, but we don't get into content. Okay. And the only way we can really get into content is whether it's on-premise or off-premise. So.
Thank you.
Any additional questions for Mr. Solberg?
If not, I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Jurdebate. For the record, I'm not voting on this item either due to a conflict with the regard to signage? Been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion?
Mr. President, could I just
Mr.
add,
Sobert.
excuse me, sorry, just add to make sure that that change that I added
Yes.
is also within there. Got the language?
Yes, sir.
I'll send it to you.
Any further discussion? We'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item number 3 is a first reading and proposed changes to the official zoning map. Mr. Solberg.
Thank you again, Mr. President. This is a little unorthodox that we're doing the first reading before the public hearing. We have a public hearing currently open at Planning Commission. So in order to move forward, we are going to have a public hearing proposed for the second reading at City Commission on January 20th. We have notified property owners that are affected by the change. We went through, and I apologize I didn't have it pulled up. I'm going to try to pull it up here as quick as I can. We went through all the changes in the zoning map. I have them highlighted in the staff report before you, and we notified those property owners that are going to be within 150 feet of any of the changes. I think probably the most significant, again, is that downtown mixed-use district. I'm going to just kind of zoom into where that is currently proposed to take place. The green dotted area here are all properties within that current Cheyenne overlay district that are zoned commercial. What we're and a small area within that main avenue corridor overlay district that are zoned commercial. What we're proposing to do is to change those from light commercial to the downtown mixed use district. Anything to the east of Center Street or First is not affected, and anything west of Wesco Square on Main is not affected. And then anything that's really along Cheyenne Street that's currently zoned commercial is what we're proposing as the downtown mixed-use district. So some of the concerns we heard during the first reading of the proposed zoning ordinance amendment, I think we've addressed in one, the addition that I made on the second reading of the downtown mixed-use district, and two, in that we're not extending beyond what's already zoned light commercial. So currently today, if you're zoned light commercial and you have the Cheyenne overlay district, you're required to have 2 stories if you're new construction, and there's no limit to the amount of stories you could have. We do have protections in there, such as our buffering and setbacks if you're adjacent to a single-family residential. But in this zoning map that we're proposing, I feel like the changes are not negatively affecting the property owners. I think there's still a lot to do, and of course, as I stated before during the ordinance amendments, we can change things as we go along if it doesn't feel right, if there's new development happening and we need to kind of take a pause. However, if this is proposed and this is accepted, this is now what they could develop as in that area. So if, for instance, as we've had redevelopment along Cheyenne Street, in today's environment, they wouldn't have to come through with a planned unit development. It would be a strictly permitted by right. They can do this there. So we'd see less planned unit developments in this downtown mixed-use district. We'd see less planned unit developments in an entertainment mixed-use district. We'd still see it on 13th likely and other areas like that. But here what we're saying is we know what we want down there, and now it is zoned for that. It's permitted by right to get a building permit and build something like that. So that's why making sure those districts are written correctly is so important. In addition to that, on this zoning map, there are some other instances where we felt it was a good time to look at a couple of different issues. One of those is there's some areas off of Main Avenue that are currently zoned commercial that have been zoned commercial for a very long time and have not redeveloped into commercial property. Their residential properties never used to be a problem. In today's mortgage market, it is a problem, however, because they can't get mortgage loans on a property that's zoned commercial, because if it burns down, they can't rebuild it. So we found a few instances where they are not adjacent to commercial. There's no current case for any redevelopment. and I highlighted those addresses in your staff report. Primarily, properties along First, Second, Third Street. We have had a lot of phone calls from people, and particularly one who's trying to sell their house right now and cannot do so. We have had instances where we've not wanted to rezone them because they really have gone into disrepair, but these areas, the homes are in good condition and very good affordable housing stock for our community, so we felt it's appropriate to change that. Another area of interest of note, there's some PUDs along Main Avenue. The PUD, I think, in this case, it's Knutson's, has sort of become just a little bit of a nuisance for when you're trying to redevelop. You have to go through a PUD amendment, and it's not always necessary. We're proposing to rezone those to light industrial along with the Steffes lot. The thing I want to highlight and note that you might have an issue with is currently within those PUDs, off-premise signs are not permitted. If they get rezoned to a light industrial or even a heavy commercial, that would be permitted. Heavy commercial would be conditional use, light industrial would be permitted. The one particular lot where that is caused us to kind of look at that is the Steffes lot. There is a sign that's on the south side of the interstate there, and that sign's in disrepair. They can't replace the sign. They can only continue to maintain it. It will be there for another 30 years if we don't rezone it. If we do rezone it, they can put a new sign up. So you'll want to make sure that you're making the right decision on that. If you do not want a new off-premise sign there, then you may want to take that one off. If you want that one replaced, which they could do if it were rezoned, you would want to pass in favor of that.
Let me interrupt you for one
Yeah.
second, please. I know that when we do these PUDs over the years, we've done them for a reason. And so I'm just wondering, do you recall or do you have any history as far as from Larry, what the reason was we had a PUD here?
Yeah, and Larry could speak to that too. The Knutson one, and similarly with Bobcat too, is one of those. We had districts that came after that sort of took care of the things that we were initially concerned about. The Steffes one, you know, there was a lot of off-site storage that was proposed that we wanted to keep clean and clear. I believe the Interstate Overlay District takes care of that. You can't have storage of materials, you can only have display of materials. It's one of those things where if it's zoned this, do we really need the PUD? You know, and so if the current commission or, you know, if you want to have Larry speak to that, if you really are concerned about that, then I say leave it as a PUD and we won't rezone it. But again, I wanted to highlight that sign will probably stay there continue to be there as long as it is still standing. If they want to replace it, it would have to get rezoned.
But you're saying we're taking care of most of the problems that we had with the PUD
the interstate
anyway.
overlay. I think the big one is the sign. So
Okay.
if you don't want a sign there, don't rezone it. If that's not an issue, then rezone it. Otherwise, it's the storage, the look of the building, those things are already addressed now with the Interstate Overlay District.
Okay.
So, and the Redevelopment Overlay District along
Mr.
Main Avenue.
Solberg, with the PUD, if you go out to that site, to the lot that you reference as the Steffes lot, what about, you know, are they licensed to have all that farm machinery sitting there? Does that fall within the parameters of the PUD? Visually, I mean, it's in Cass County, but it's in our PUD.
I'm not aware of on this specific lot that they're storing. If they're storing farm machinery there, it would have to be like a display. It wouldn't be able to be just base storage.
We're talking about on the north side of Main Avenue now, right?
The south side of
You're thinking of the
Main.
Outside of Main Avenue.
Okay. So I guess
On the very west end of the fairgrounds?
yeah.
There's combines and stuff parked there right now.
Okay. Then if it's
I just-
rezoned, yeah.
I went on a tour with Public Works with all the snow that we got.
Okay.
That's the only reason I know that.
Yeah,
We drove by.
I didn't know that. I'd have to look at that. If it's light industrial, you know, you can store things like that, but within the overlay district, there are some restrictions to that.
If you would,
So if
please.
they're there and they shouldn't be, we would notify them of the violation. So, and usually when anybody pulls a building permit, we go through and, you know, check the property. Otherwise, it's complaint basis. So if I'm not paying attention as I drive everywhere, I will try to do so.
I guess, so the big question
I'll
is,
take
if
note of
we
that.
were to rezone this, would they be allowed to have the equipment sitting there?
If it's screened from the road, so they'd have to screen it. They could have equipment, but they'd have to screen it.
To screen the combine,
Yeah.
so, okay.
So, unless it was display, you know, so if they could have display, sales lot, something like that, so. Again, this is the first reading. We'll dig into that a little bit more for the second reading, so. Another one I want to highlight is, in, Eaglewood development, there was some properties that were zoned PUD prior to the R1SM district. It causes some issues when people are refinancing. We're proposing to rezone those to R1SM. And, I think that is it. Oh, the entertainment mixed-use district, we're proposing to rezone, all of the, Eagle Run Plaza 6th Edition PUD, which includes the hockey rink, lights at Cheyenne 32, and the northern lights at Cheyenne 32, as we discussed about when we created that entertainment mixed-use district. So that would allow them the ability to come in for a conditional use permit to consider an off-premise sign. It would allow them to redevelop in that area within the confines of the district standards rather than coming with a PUD each time. So sometimes PUDs are a little complicated. Then we have overlay districts or other zoning districts that come into play that sort of take that PUD and bring it to fruition. It's really the Menards property, things like that are how we created some of our overlay districts. Someday, if they want to redevelop that site, I would propose we change it to a different type of zoning district rather than a PUD. So we may come back with something like that in the future as well. Again, this is proposed for first reading. We have notified property owners of both the public hearing that's open at Planning Commission, so we'll discuss this on next Tuesday's meeting. I expect to have more public comment that will come forward to you, and we'll have a public hearing scheduled for January 20th at City Commission at 5:30. If we need to push off a second reading, completely comfortable with that. It's really the comfort level of the Commission, but I didn't want to hold it back by missing a deadline. That's why tonight we're proposing the first reading. Of course, anytime between a first and second reading we can make changes. I've highlighted all those changes for you tonight, and we'll continue to go into further discussion on that at Planning Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Silver. Additional questions? Again, we're discussing the first reading of the proposed changes to the official zoning map.
I guess, thank you. Again, I guess we have time between the first reading and the second reading to go to deep into it. I'm sure that people that are here tonight, if they have an interest, they'll definitely bring it forward. So having said that, I'd make a motion to move on to the second reading.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdevig seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the first reading of proposed changes to the official zoning map as presented by Mr. Solberg. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Solberg.
Thank you.
Next order of business is item number 4 is reviews of the proposed concept plan for the ranch at the Wilds, first edition. Mr. Solberg.
Thank you again, Mr. President and Commissioners. This proposal for a planned unit development of approximately 77 single-family homes with associated HOA amenities and lots has currently passed its first review by Planning Commission for approval of the concept. City ordinance does not require action by the City Commission at this time. However, often a developer seeking to further develop their detailed development plans wants to get a little bit of feedback. So tonight, the applicant is here and has a small presentation that they want to provide. I'm just going to quickly go over Planning Commission's recommendation currently at this point. They did recommend approval of the concept. They have 8 conditions that they've provided. First, developer moved the proposed development off of the collector and arterial roadway to preserve the potential of this area to be used for commercial development. And I just touch on that one. We've talked a little bit with both the developer and the owner of the property surrounding this. They feel strongly that this area is really essential for their development. When I look at any vacant piece of land based on our comprehensive plan, we're going to try to find a way to get jobs or sales tax in there. It's really the imbalance in our comp plan is important to note. And so when we're looking at these properties, looking at something like this where it's near an arterial collector was one of those things that we got to make sure that we look at that. Certainly, property owners within the area have pushed back against that, and the neighborhood, as the development of the neighborhood has occurred, both the developer and the owner feel like that's not consistent with their vision for the area. So, you know, that's something for you to think of as a policy basis, if that's as far as I'll take it, and let both commission and developer consider that. Second, developer provide connectivity to surrounding land through either roadway or trail. Initially, the developer here had proposed public streets. Since our last meeting, they've conceded to potentially having some private streets. So having connection through there is potentially less of a deal. We still would like to make sure it's not cutting off other areas of development. So as the detailed development plans continue, we have to look at the area plans to make sure that there is connection somehow, some way through there. We'll continue to monitor that. Number 3, developer required to obtain approval of dedication requirements and address shortfall present in agreements for the Wild 6th and 7th editions. We did receive fee in lieu for the shortfall that they had. So there was a shortfall from Wild's 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th developments. They've since made themselves whole on that by providing fee in lieu of park dedication that was in a promissory note that we had on the Wild 6th edition. A check was submitted before the first of the year on that, so that's been satisfied. City Commission consider right-of-way widths. The developer continues to pursue reduction from 62 feet. Again, as I stated, the developer has provided that they're willing to do the private roads. City Commission to consider lack of sidewalk in interior lots. That one's addressed to the private streets potentially. Developer be required to address regional retention concerns of the city engineer. That's a big thing that they're going to have to deal with. We cannot just allow a piece of the development to occur within a greater area without considering those regional concerns. That's something that Dustin is keeping tabs on with their engineer, working with them on that. Developer addressed concerns of city engineer included but not limited to regional retention requirements. I could have Dustin expound upon that after the developer speaks, if you'd like. But there's items in here that Dustin's going to have to be reviewing as they go along, because if it's just private street, we're still going to have to accept public improvements within here, water and sewer, and those are things that he needs to ensure are done per city standards, et cetera, and that the developer pays those fees to have those things monitored. So, and then the last one is just typical of all of our PUDs. The detailed development plans would be required, along with meeting all the requirements of other districts. So, with that, I'm going to step aside and, Tyrone, did you want to speak? Now, I'll pull up a presentation that he had on this subject and leave it to him. So, unless you have more questions than me.
Questions for Mr. Soberg? Thank you.
Well, first of all, good you all. It's an honor to be able to talk about this project and how excited we are as a builder to be able to come into West Fargo and do what we believe is going to be a pretty darn unique project that's really going to fill a need for our community and our city. This is going to be a active adult community ranging anywhere from the ages of 55 to 75 years old. The benefits of this, it's going to be low density, high quality homes in this project. We love the location, and I think the community will also love the fact that it's going to be less traffic for the area, collecting taxes, of course, and also for the schools, but no children going to the school. So it's kind of like the best of both worlds, which allows future developments to be able to have kids and certainly take advantage of the schooling that's there. These homes are going to be single-family homes. That's going to range anywhere from I think right around that 1,500 square feet, all the way up to 3,000 square feet. So average pricing being about that $380,000 to about $650,000. The development is going to be very, very unique in the sense that it's going to include some phenomenal connectivity from sidewalks around the pond, around the development, to a clubhouse that's going to have a wonderful social ability. I gave you guys a brochure that kind of shows you what the development is going to look like in that respect, a pickleball court as well. It is going to be something that none of the cities have out there right now, and there is a need out there. Of course, being involved in a real estate company, we see and hear what people are looking for, and we believe that we're going to have a tremendous draw to this community with this project and whatnot. So we're very, very excited about it, and we wanted to talk to you about it, and or certainly or field any questions that you guys may have as well with it. And we also brought Steve Peck from FCON as well to talk to you about the projects that he's done around the country as well. So just to let you know the success that we've had and that they've had with this project. And not to mention, from our standpoint, we've done plenty of building. We've been in this community for 20, 25 years. We put our reputation on quality product homes. We are certainly sensitive to wherever we build, to making sure whatever we build, it's going to be an enhancement to the city or the community. And thank God we've been very, very fortunate so far with every project that we have done. And we do know it's time to create a project. Even in the comp plan, it does discuss that there is a need for active adult projects. This one here fits that bill incredibly well. And I can assure you, with the way we're demonstrating it and certainly going to be building it, it is going to be absolutely gorgeous. We're also working on a video to be able to help people understand and visually see what the beauty of this is going to be. But we are very, very excited. And with that, I would certainly like to bring up Steve Peck to kind of talk a little bit more about the intricacies of the project. And it's right here. Yeah, you know how to do that.
Good evening, Commissioners. Steve Peck. Do you need my address or anything for the record? Okay.
Yes.
Just real quick, kind of talk about EPCON and our partnership here with Heritage Homes. Right now, EPCON Communities, we've developed over 400 communities in the last 30 years throughout the country. You can kind of see our footprint here. Build over 30,000 homes. We partner with local home builders to produce our product, and are pretty proud of our footprint, and our market foothold and our national presence provides lots of advantages and tons of market research on what our buyers are actually looking for. Right now we have over 40 franchise builders across the country. Our sole focus is active adult market. That's all we produce. So we put a lot of time in making sure that we're providing the right product for this buyer. Across the country, on our detached products, our average buyer age is 62 years old. These people make great neighbors. They are quiet, they drive less, they don't produce school children, and it's really good, and we fit in a lot of great areas. We have 85 communities active today, and we look for quality builders that take care of their communities, and we're excited to have Heritage here locally to continue that. What do we sell? We sell lifestyle. So we're not just selling lots, we're selling a community. There's no raking, there's no shoveling, there's no mowing. We provide community amenities, a clubhouse, pools. In this case, we will have pickleball courts. You know, and our clubhouses are built so that, you know, there's daily activities. There's a wall in the clubhouses where people sign up for wine night. You know, come watch the Vikings, you know, Vikings parties, those type of things. So we really market to creating that community for the people this age. So Rancho Wilds, as you've probably seen the stats, 77 units on 23 acres. We are providing some walkable amenities along with the clubhouse and the pickleball. These are owner-occupied homes, fee simple platted lots, and everything we have is single-story living. Every house has 2 bedrooms and 2 full baths on the main floor. We do have a large footprint because we're providing so much square footage on that first floor. So our lots are big. Over, I would say on average, our lot sizes are averaging 9,000 square feet. So we are not necessarily high density. We are low density with larger lots, but our footprints are really big. And when you see the product, once Tyrone gets going, you'll see why and how open the things are. Again, I'll mention again, we have a long history of reduced traffic. In the latest version of the International Traffic Engineers, they've created a new category for senior detached housing. So they've studied that. Senior detached housing provide half the traffic of your typical single-family homes. So even with a few more houses here, we would net less traffic than if these were to remain as they were originally planned for single-family homes. And if you look at commercial, we've done a study, and I can hand it out if you want. But if you were to put a CVS, a bank, a daycare center, and a couple of doctor's office, you would produce 3 times the amount of traffic that this detached senior housing would produce. An incredible impact, especially when you look at trying to incorporate commercial across the street from the school. All right, if there's gas stations there and you got school buses coming in and out, people walking, that would be quite the impact. I'm sure you've seen the plan. Just really looking forward to hearing your comments on it. There's a streetscape, again, high-end finishes on the interior and the exteriors, detached housing. We have and a big part of what we do on the exterior lots, our product is a side courtyard. So in the top right, you'll see our homes live off of the sides. So we really don't care historically what we back to, because we don't impact anything off the rear. Everything backing into the pond would be rear living, but everything along the exterior of the prop is side courtyards. So our houses are designed, when you look at the bottom left, the houses that face the courtyard have no windows on them. So that is a private area you see with a trellis. Occasionally there'll be some transom windows up high, but we create that privacy because of the design of the houses. What you face and what you look into creates that privacy. And that was it. So happy to hear your questions.
Questions for Mr. Peck or Mr. Leslie?
Tyrone, I don't know, maybe.
Please.
Thank you. I don't know if this is too early yet or not, but what are we talking about when we're talking about private drives and, you know, as far as the width of the roads? I know we all, I'm sure, have concerns about the width of the roads as far as are they going to be, 100%. How wide they're going to be, and traffic flow. Can our trucks get in?
We have our engineer to talk about that too, but they're going to be just as standard as we typically do in residential. And Brian can certainly.
Evening, Commissioner.
Excuse me, your name, please?
Brian Pattengale with Houston Engineering, engineering the project. I can speak to a little bit to that. We are doing traditional, maybe private roads, but they're basically built more or less city standards as far as widths and stuff goes. Right now we're proposing like a 29-foot right-of-way, or not right-of-way, I'm sorry, width for the streets with like 11-foot boulevards on both sides. So very typical to your standard low-density residential neighborhood streets. So we're not trying to like shrink them down to like 10-foot wide roads or anything like that. There's just with some of the, you know, trying to condense the neighborhood a little bit more efficient for costs and for accessibility and stuff. We didn't want to go with standard city right-of-way width. After some discussion with the city staff, we sort of decided that the private roads with public infrastructure utilities is the more appropriate way to approach this. It helped address a lot of the concerns from engineering, public works, and planning regarding minimum right-of-way width, sidewalk locations, and just in general how we're kind of laying things out. So it's, yeah, we're not trying to put in, you know, little tiny narrow streets. Talking standard city streets, very typical of that.
So just a curious question. Standard, Dustin, what's our standard width on the street?
The standard width on a city street is 29 feet.
So you're talking about doing almost 29 feet. Why would you want to have that private then? I'm just curious.
Part of it is the reduced right-of-way width. The city requires a minimum right-of-way width of 62 feet.
Okay, so it's not the street, it's the
right-of-way.
The right-of-way that you're looking at.
We shrunk it down a little bit, and we proposed that as a change to the city. City staff wasn't comfortable with that, so we said, okay, let's look at a different way to do that, and that's how we approached it with the public utilities and private streets.
Okay.
And the other thing that's traditionally in our residential neighborhoods, we have a 29-foot wide street. We also have 4-foot sidewalks on each side.
Right.
If you look at their layout, they are proposing on at least one side not to have sidewalks. So that's where gonna go with a narrow, it's gonna be an easement, and then bring the houses a little closer together, but that's one of the compromises that will occur with this neighborhood. It will not have a traditional sidewalk out in front of the homes, at least in some of them, whereas in our standard neighborhoods, we require a 4-foot sidewalk.
But they'll all know that, I'm assuming, before they move in.
Absolutely.
So, I mean,
we have
that's
it
the
all
big
on
key.
full video for them too. But what we want to say is that it's not that we're just trying to eliminate a sidewalk. We're putting the sidewalk on the backyards of the rear family homes so that people can use that sidewalk to walk around the pond. The connectivity is similar, it's just that we're just decided to move the sidewalk on the one side of the street to the back to take advantage of the pond that's
Sure,
behind.
okay, fine.
Mr. Thorstead?
So, following up to, Commissioner Simmons' question, would that be a controlled access roadway, or would they just, you plan on having them open?
For the most part, there won't be like a controlled gate or anything, controlling access as far as the gatehouse goes.
Oh, you mean like an actual gate closing up and open?
Right, we've got some developments that are kinda like this down the south side of town here. One of them has kind of a gate system, the other one doesn't.
Open.
But that's been a concern of the residents, cause they had a lot of traffic cutting through, and they, at least those residents didn't anticipate that should be happening.
That gets to a little bit of the connectivity that the city has sort of mentioned before. We've sort of got the 2 connectivity points where it's not a straight through to another neighborhood. It's sort of confined to the traffic of that specific neighborhood. So there's not a lot of through traffic.
Yeah, we don't feel any concern with it because we don't think people just drive in there to get to the other side. They won't come down 52nd to go to 9th. It would be an inconvenience, but it is not going to be a gated community per se.
Okay, and then I would assume through your HOA agreements, it would distinctly make it clear that this is public, private roadways and private facilities, because the city always gets all the calls
Absolutely.
when
We've
something's
done-
not plowed or something's out of repair or something like that. So that's something that has to be very well laid out in advance of people buying property.
Absolutely, fantastic question, and that's exactly what we've done with all of the other ones that we've done in West Fargo and Fargo. We've made sure the covenants definitely documents that property for the homeowners, and that it will be maintained by the HOA.
Okay, and then, just for curiosity, how do you control the age requirements? I mean, once you get a certain amount of population in there, that certain age, that's gonna attract others, obviously, but there have been instances where people have targeted a certain demographics, it hasn't worked out, and all of a sudden the thing has swung to different demographics because, quite frankly, folks had to sell some property.
Yeah, historically, we don't have to age restrict because of our HOA documents. Basketball hoops aren't going to be allowed, trampolines aren't gonna be allowed. The side yards really aren't great for kids. There's really not much room other than for some pets to go relieve themselves. So that, the market kind of dictates the age restriction there because of what's allowed and what's permitted, particularly even on the exteriors.
Okay, and I see we got some, representatives of our fire department here, and I know in their, comp plan, which, we just went through here just recently, they're trying to, establish, coverage throughout the city, and I believe that area you're talking about was one of the areas they had looked at for a possible, location of a facility, and I guess, maybe Chief, you can talk about that, whether this is gonna
Chief Fuller.
stomp on your comp plan or not?
No, that's a great question, Commissioner Thorstead. This area here is in our furthest southern fire planning district, District 4. Right now, the call volume isn't there to support a fire station, but we know that there's space within this area that is open that we're gonna need at some point to put a fire station in. So we are working right now on how that fire station is gonna fit, not in this community itself, on the outskirts of it, and how we're gonna go forward with that, but that district goes up to 38th Avenue and then comes down to our city limits to the south, down to Horace and east over to Fargo and then over to the diversion. So it will be needed at some point in time. We're keeping an eye on where we can get it in.
Okay, so you don't need to be within what they're proposing. You could be right in the surrounding area, but I think that's something we're gonna have to keep on the
we
front
wouldn't,
burner as it develops.
given what they're talking about for streets and stuff like that, there's really no reason that we would be in that at all. We would be on the outskirts of that. We need your access to 52nd to get up to 9th.
Okay, and I saw a memo in our documents from the building inspections department regarding, I believe, fire codes. They're concerned, I believe, about how the structures were somewhat close together. And I guess question for you, the developers, are you prepared to meet those standards, I guess, as, if they indeed, do apply in this case?
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit, Commissioners. Initially, this was proposed as what's called a zero lot line development, where basically you slide these structures to one side of the lot and the other side becomes open. Essentially, it provides more usable space on the sides of the home instead of having sort of like 2 6-foot yards that neither property owner can use. After speaking with the building officials, they had concerns about allowing that through the zoning and the building code conflicting. So we're working forward with that, but essentially instead of doing a true zero lot line, we're just going to apply some easements. And we'll actually set the houses back 5 foot off the property line like they want. We'll just restrict the uses and allow the neighbors to use the adjacent property to use that through the use of easements and documents on the plats. It'll still accomplish the same thing as far as the layout and design of what the homeowners and the developer wants to provide. It's just we're doing some creative work with the platting and the easement works that the city will see. We just haven't updated that yet. Obviously, we're still in that process of, after our last meeting, addressing those concerns and updating the plans as we go.
Maybe I would also add that these homes will certainly be further apart from each other from a typical residential area. So the zero lot line makes it almost appear like these are going to be really, really close. They're simply not. They're in some cases are going to be more than what the city is doing right now. So there's plenty of space between all the houses. It's a technical term as far as trying to do something that's been done all over the place. But in this case, because it's a zero lot line, it means that we have to fall into the firewall in that area. Because usually the zero lot line means your houses are going to be really close. In this case, it's simply not going to be that. There's going to be plenty of space between the houses.
Okay, and then last question, probably for Tim, because Tim, you mentioned something about commercial, question about commercial in that area, and I guess the question I would have is, yeah, we want as much commercial as we can get in town. Obviously, there's a lot of positive sides to that, but is that area even would that even make a good commercial area? And I believe, Bernie, maybe you can help me, or John, I don't know, is there going to be a bridge over the diversion at 52nd? Is that the plan?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so there will eventually, many years down the road, be more traffic to the west. By outside of a convenience store at that corner, I guess I couldn't envision that would be a highly desirable commercial area.
Our previous land use plan did have this lined up as commercial. Our current land use plan has removed those colored sections of town to really leave us with the overall themes and goals of the comp plan. It doesn't mean it's going to be a convenience store, doesn't mean it's going to be a retail outlet. Commercial sometimes just means jobs, so people aren't getting in their cars and driving elsewhere to work. You know, one of the things we found is people are leaving often their place of living to their place of employment. So places like Wex Health, and how Wex Health is really tucked right into a residential neighborhood, were some of the things on my mind. But this is why you all make these policy decisions. We're going to bring to you every time. We're going to say if there's a vacant piece of land, comp plan says we got to look at commercial because we need jobs and we need some of that additional sales tax, property tax that comes from commercial to help pay for all this major infrastructure that we have to pay for. So you're going to hear that from me every time. But when the neighborhood comes out and says we don't want commercial there, and developer says this is consistent with our plan, then you guys have now a sort of a dilemma before you to think about. So, yeah. So you're probably right. My long answer was that let's always look at commercial.
Okay. Well, yeah, my opinion is, you're looking for opinions tonight, is feedback. Is it'd make more sense down at Cheyenne or near Cheyenne than it would at this location. I just, maybe someday there'll be cars driving by going over to the diversion, you know, into any development, 50 years from now or whatever that's out there. But I just, outside of a convenience store, I couldn't even envision a business that would really want to locate in that particular location. It's all homes, and that's removed. So that, I just wanted to, I appreciate you bringing it up. We certainly always are looking for opportunities for commercial development, stuff like that. But I guess that's all I got. Sorry, I got a whole long list of questions. But
Thank you, Commissioner Thorstad. Additional question, Commissioner Jurdovic.
Just one quick question. Is that a city pond or will that be a privately owned pond, I guess, or, and maybe that's undecided at this point, but I guess just to put that.
Yeah, so at this point, they're still proposing that it be a city pond. There's going to be a city requirement for regional retention to be provided. As it's currently shown in their concept plan, it wouldn't meet our standards. again, we've had a meeting with them. There's a number of items that they're gonna work on and address, but in terms of the pond itself, a couple of comments would be, one, the residential around the pond needs to be extended, those property lines need to be extended into the water so that the city's not maintaining the said sidewalk along the, or any green spaces around the water perimeter. There's also the clubhouse there. So, there's some design requirements that they're gonna have to follow, and then the city would, certainly take it over. We traditionally wanna own and maintain our regional ponds, so that we ensure that they're operating properly. So again, along with some of the other components, I imagine, or I anticipate changes to what you're seeing in the concept plan.
Which we're well aware of too, and we're making those adjustments, for sure.
Commissioner Olson?
In regards to the, excuse me, the private streets, if there were a water main break or street lights out or something like that, who would be responsible for that and who would pay for that?
Absolutely. Great question, Commissioner Olson. So this isn't the first time we've had a private entity install public infrastructure. Most recently it was the Hornbacher site, Cashwise development. It's been traditionally more in the commercial sector, Duluth Trading Company, where they've installed our utilities underneath a street that it's a private street that they maintain. When we establish an agreement for this and or permit the work, the requirements are going to be that any surface appurtenances, so a gate valve, a manhole, a hydrant, something that's on the surface, if it becomes damaged, it's going to be their responsibility to repair it. So if a manhole ends up, the pavement around it ravels and the manhole's kind of kinked and it's something that's of concern, whether or not they identify it before we find it and fix it, great. But if we identify it, we will notify the HOA that it needs to be corrected and give them generally a time frame to do so. And if they don't, then we will go and make a repair, and we will again work out in the agreement the ability to charge that to the HOA or the adjoining property owner, depending on what that particular issue will be. So, but now if it's a mainline utility that breaks, the city will go in there and repair it just like any other water main break. If the hydrant is broken, we will fix that. So, but again, anything that's within the street, so even our manhole, they'll be responsible to repair or replace.
So if we have to rip up a street to get to the water main break, who repairs the street? Is that us?
That's something that will be, again, identified in the agreement, and we could go, where we've done it in the past, there's been cases where we will just return it to a gravel, and again, it was a store, but they had to go and either replace the pavement themselves, or I believe the city also had the ability to put a new pavement section in, but then invoice that owner accordingly. So again, there's a lot of details to get worked out. It's the high level concept is being discussed today. One being that this will be an HOA development. Two, that they're going to privately install some city infrastructure, which means they're going to adhere to some standards. And again, just the general nature of the development, the concept, but there's a lot of detail to be worked out, and sometimes the devil's in the detail. So we'll be able to flush out what, if there's something that's hung up or that we feel needs to come back to the city commission, we will certainly do so. And again, the detailed development plans are the next phase, and you'll have the opportunity to see the progress and review and ask any other questions. But again, we've been working with the developer. We'll continue to do so, and with the common objective of a good product for the city of West Fargo and for the developer.
Additional questions? Mr. Leslie, Mr. Soberg, or Mr. Peck? Mr. Soberg.
So again, tonight, no action is requested. I do want to, however, note that we did tell the property owners that came out to hear about this during the concept phase that we'll notify them when we get the detailed development plans that are reviewed before the Planning Commission. And then if approved by the Planning Commission, there will be another public hearing before the City Commission. It is an ordinance amendment, so it requires first and second reading and public hearing, so.
For the record, Mr. Solberg, would you state the exact address of this for the public that's watching on television and the like? We refer to it as the Ranch and Wild's First Edition.
So there's no address for the parcel. Right now it's a vacant parcel, but it's on the corner of 9th Street West and 52nd Avenue West.
Directly east?
It would be on the east of 9th Street, east of Legacy Elementary, and north of 52nd Avenue.
That's what I wanted you to say. Thank you. Any additional input? Questions? Thank you, gentlemen, for being with us this evening.
Thank you so much.
As Mr. Solberg had indicated, there is no action required on this item. Next order of business is item number 5, the first reading of ordinance number 1146, bench sign franchise. I'll remind you that Mr. Thorstead and myself will not be voting on this line item. Mr. Shockley.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the West Fargo City Commission, the ordinance is to repeal in its entirety the bench sign franchise ordinance. The current franchise is set to expire on June 30th of 2020. City staff is moving towards just having decorative benches rather than signs on the benches. So the recommendation was to repeal the bench sign franchise in its entirety. That's really as simple as the ordinance is. It's a policy decision for the City Commission.
Commissioners? Questions of Mr. Shockley?
I move we approve.
Commissioner Olson moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Jurdevig seconds. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
One.
Mr. Thorsten, are you all right?
I'm all right. I'll survive.
Moving on to the next item, number 6. Presentation of West Fargo events, preliminary event planning. Mr. Amundson.
Mr. President and Commissioners, thank you very much for having me this evening. Trying to figure out your technology here. There are a couple of inclusions in your packet tonight, the calendar of events and some preliminary planning information that we're utilizing for the West Fargo events staff to be able to bring a mix of activity to our community as more venues come online for us to have a hand in. And so I thought that it might be worthwhile for us to have a brief recap, overview of our organization, a recap of the 2019 and what we are looking forward to in 2020 and moving forward in the future. So beginning with our governance, West Fargo Events has a 9-member board of directors brought to us by some civic entities and the community at large. We have 2 members each from the City of West Fargo Commission, as some of you are on the board of directors that I serve now, along with the Park District from West Fargo and the School District. We also have 3 community at large members in our group. Our funding comes primarily currently from management contracts. As things progress in the forward and venues come online, we will also have sponsorship opportunities. We currently collect some sponsorship dollars, but not nearly what we're anticipating in the near future as venues come online, as well as donations and some rental agreements that will come about from our potential public spaces as well. Through our nonprofit board of civil servants and at-large members, we do have some mechanisms in place to ensure proper spending and oversight of all of these dollars that are brought in, as well as some financial oversight in communication with the finance department here at the city as well. Moving forward to the POW MIA Plaza in 2019, it was here and gone in a hurry. Ever since I came on board in June, I feel like I'm still in my first month here working. But successful events included a Blind Joe concert at the Emporium concert, the Halloween Trick or Treat Street, our first year of that, as well as a community tree lighting and an ice festival, along with some of the other events that we have listed here, neighborhood gatherings. A few rentals happened. We have already begun our budgeting process for 2020, and preliminary approval has happened, along with some of our guidance from the city employees, and as well as planning our community events starting here just in the next couple of months. Nothing will be taken away from the POW MIA Plaza as things progress and new venues come online. In fact, we'll be adding to the variety that is brought to that facility. We will be adding some new events in 2020, as well as continuing with some successful events this year and rentals that happened in 2019 as well. We will still have some significant rentals from the VFW with their bag leagues that happen every week, and we will diversify the Family Fun Night events that we started from 7 to 9 p.m. traditionally on Thursday nights. We'll be expanding those to include a new variety of activity in 2020. Some of those plans include adding a fitness element to the programming at that location. We are also expanding our partnership with the Park District to add some new events coming, starting in just a couple of weeks here in January. On the 18th, we'll be having our first ever sled parade, and we will have a hot cocoa cook-off as well as a DJ-led ice skating event on the 18th, and that is being spearheaded by our Park District. So our partnership with them is expanding nicely, and we're getting some more variety and, quite frankly, just a new voice helping with some of the fun activities that are happening there. We're leaning on our partners to help us come up with new ideas. I had a great discussion with Carissa from the West Fargo Library on working on expanding some of our offerings there as well. So we'll be able to branch out with some brand new ideas in 2020, as well as keep working on our DBA partnerships that are very vital to the activity that's happening down in that area, and very important to those business owners that are helping support us as well. Staffing will be needed to support the increased activity, traffic, and maintenance, but this goes for our entire organization, not just the POW MIA Plaza. Input was taken as our partnership evolved to include the parking ramp potentially here from outside sources, as well as the city finance professionals, as we formulated a budget that will be presented to you soon. This budget was put together from outlying area ramps with their actual budget proposals that they put forward to their governance and oversight committees, and then we were able to plug some of their numbers from their actuals into our process. Public spaces will be available very soon. The entry level of the ramp is currently available to use, as well as the second level by our contractors. And as the certificate of occupancy comes for the building, we will be able to welcome the public on all 4 levels of that space soon enough. The parking ramp will also be utilized as a staging area for the entire Lights Entertainment District. We have some very valuable space in there for our technical space, as well as our storage areas, to be able to operate everything to the immediate south in the Lights Entertainment District. And then also, as with all things, time produces trends. That will be included in our budgeting as well. Obviously, we have to err on the side of caution with all of our budgeting for the Lights District and the ramp currently, but as we are able to get some hard numbers and get through some operating time, we will be able to reduce those as well and narrow down that scope. We're now entering also the ramp-up process for the lights. Marketing will soon begin after contracts get signed, and so will hiring. The goal for the lights is to have a very diversified staff that bring many different visions to the table and workplace experience. Some management layering will be necessary to ensure success, and we will work hard to attract people from all different entities and previous lines of work, whether they be from the hospitality, tourism industry, public service professionals, and event planning professionals will be leaned on very heavily to be able to find our next workforce. That hiring and ramp-up will start soon, as we only have 5 months to go before it's showtime at the lights. And so we will be working on lining up our vendors and promoters, as well as our industry staff very soon here. Getting to some of the excitement that the lights is going to bring to West Fargo events and the community of West Fargo. There will be a fitness element there as well. The corridor really lends itself very nicely for fitness, as well as the walkability and bikeability of that entire area. Having all of that connected through nice wide pathways and the underpass on the intersection of Cheyenne and 32nd is very valuable for us, not only to attract families with strollers and wagons for kids, but also for bikers and any fitness enthusiasts that might want to attend our offerings very naturally. They need ways to get there and ways to get home, as well as we will find ways to also do tours of the city, bike tours, as well as potentially some running and some other fitness events that we can tie into that space. Utilizing the natural topography there will be real nice. We will work to try to identify a speaker series, as well as bring in various shows and professional events, obviously. Vendors and market opportunities will bring opportunities not only for the sellers to be able to do business, but also for the buyers to be able to find products and unique things that they need or want to add to their households. The booking and hold process is actually something that we're currently going through right now, and it's a little bit clunky at times and kind of difficult to finally nail things down. But we are being contacted by a lot of entertainers and promoters, as well as vendors wanting to bring their shows to our area. They're asking us for our rental rates and our contracts to be able to take a look at the preliminary process of setting something up. Oftentimes, we're going through a promoter hold event where they want to know that they've got the date to be able to work with their entertainer, and then they line up all the I's and T's that need to be dotted and crossed before they put their contract forward to the entertainer to actually put their signature on the dotted line to be able to say, yes, we are holding this concert, this event. Those entertainers normally have the last say, or their manager, at that point. We have to have everything lined out first before they say yes or no. There's a lot of work that goes into it before, on the back end, before we can actually release who is coming to town, what act is going to play, or what show is going to come to town to allow people to buy goods and services. Lastly, we're also working with the city staff and professionals to help define what that entertainment district model might look like. We need to be able to work within the proper confines and be able to have deliverables that will work within the parameters that are set forth for us. Things like being at the right audio levels, at the right dates and times that are appropriate are very important to us. We want to be able to fulfill whatever those needs are by the city employees and the city staff. We want to also be good stewards as the management group that's working to bring in acts and performers to this area as well. Lastly, some of the things that we can talk about. You do have the list of what we are prepared to release to the general public, and they were shared with you through email and then also in your packets. We are going to have a bike safety rodeo to address some of the safety concerns that we experienced last summer in our community. The concerts with performers' names attached will still be released at a later date, but we will be putting on Monday markets. Every Monday when we get into the markets and producers season, we will have a weekly event to be able to showcase some of those products that are available locally. We will have non-program play opportunities, whether that's oversized lawn games, whether it's giant Jenga, or even some of the permanent structures that we have at the POW MIA Plaza being brought or added to at the lights, whether it's the chess and checkers boards, whether it's having bag toss available, different games that families can play or seniors can play at any point in time. Those non-programmed opportunities are important as well. We will have a water feature at some point installed on the plaza as well, having some fun for kids and also just to beautify the space as well. We are working on a very exciting pet event, which actually is listed for you in detail on the Family Fun Nights list that you were given. We are contacting, a lot of different vendors that will have pet ties in our community, whether they be dog trainers, whether they be people that do recreational things with their pets, or if they are selling any items that might be useful for a dog owner, a cat lover, or any other pet. We want to be able to connect those people with things that they care about. Lastly, the last two things that I want to touch on is festival booking. We are working on bringing some very fun activities that gather around food and also the wine and beer industry. We will be hosting a couple of different festivals that will have some different adult as well as family-friendly offerings, whether they be a Pizza Palooza event, a wing event with some sort of cook-off involved, and then as well as some sort of a beer and wine festival to be able to wrap up something for a little more adult flair as well. Lastly, every week it's our goal to have some sort of a family event in those spaces, whether it be the POW MIA Plaza or the lights. We want to have something family friendly that West Fargo Events puts on for our community every week, whether it's a family movie night, whether it's games on the plaza. It could be one of these pet events. It could also be a themed kids night with inflatables, and maybe it's pirate themed one weekend and Disney princesses the next weekend. We will offer something for families to do together every single week, and that is what we are operating under for our goals as a staff to be able to bring to our community. Lastly, the value of our partnership with West Fargo Events is a variable line of attack that we can take after obstacles. Experiences by our current staff, stakeholders, board members, and future staff will be used to problem solve creatively and come up with unique solutions that are a best fit approach for each individual situation that we might face. Sometimes we need to lean on our partners like the school district, the city, and the park district. Other times we can problem solve and take care of small things that might come our way as a staff, just as West Fargo Events staff members by ourselves. By pulling from multiple resources, we can maximize our value both as an entity that we want to plan and implement things for our community, but also as an entity that is doing services on a contract basis for the community. We need to be good stewards to you with your dollars as well, and we take that very seriously. Are there any questions or comments from any of the board or staff?
Questions for Mr. Amundson? Mr. Olson.
You mentioned the volume. Last summer we had some volume issues at the MIA POW Plaza. In your budget, are you addressing that, or in your planning concerts, are you going to address the volume of the concerts being held there?
We're doing a better job preliminarily of being on top of that with our acts. We have adjusted our time frame to 7 to 9 p.m. In the past, that was an issue after 10 p.m. Where the volume was really an issue for the neighborhood. We have cut down on the total amount of concerts in the neighborhood there, which will help with some of those disturbances that the neighbors felt. We will also make sure it's a little more clear to the acts that there will be no putting up with any of that nonsense outside of the contracted hours that they are to play.
Very good.
Are there any additional acoustical things that you're considering? I know at one time that discussion took place.
We did take a look at a couple of options, and they're pretty cost prohibitive in that tight space. We've got the alleyway immediately to the west that would take away our bracing area for any sound wall or acoustic wall. We could do something very small right behind the stage if we wanted to, but we figured that that wouldn't have much effect. I think having a proactive approach with the bands might be more effective than trying to put a whole bunch of money into a sound wall, right away. We would like to try to take care of it proactively with the bands before we have to get to the point of dumping a lot of money into that.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. Anyone else? Great presentation, by the way. I would like to compliment you personally with regard to my biggest concern over the lights and the POW, MIA coming on as a commissioner was going to be the sustainability, to be able to do enough programming of content that is worthy of the public's tax dollars. I have no reservations whatsoever anymore, Mr. Robinson, since you've come on board for the job that you're doing. Your creativity of content is exciting to observe, and I commend you for that. I would ask you on one thing, on your slides, whenever you're dealing with the downtown area, the Cheyenne Street, the MIA POW, that there be one more word included in there when dealing with content, when dealing with programming and everything, and that's neighborhood. We have an existing neighborhood down there that needs to maintain its integrity for all those fine folks that live down there, and you've done a great job at that. I commend you for that. We're in a much better place than we were, but we need to keep be mindful of that, please.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else?
I would say the same. Excellent job, Mike. You've been fantastic since you've been here. And I only see better things coming to the West Fargo event, so thank you for that. And the whole team, actually. The whole team has done good, so we appreciate it a lot.
Thank you. Everyone involved deserves that, so I'll pass on that message.
Congratulations on your success. Next order of business is number 7, construction updates. Mr. Scott?
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Commission. I really don't have much to report on for construction tonight. I will say that at the next meeting I plan to bring some updates on the CIP, as well as we're going to have our consultant do a presentation on the core area infrastructure management plan.
Excellent.
That study. So nothing for tonight unless you have specific questions.
Commissioners, any questions? Mr. Scott? Thank you, sir. City Administrator's Report. Mrs. Fisk?
Good evening, Commission President and Commissioners. I don't have a lot of items either. We've been very busy today, this week, last week, 2 weeks, this month. But one thing I do want to do is introduce to you Matt Anvig. He is our new Public Works Director, and his first day was today. And he promised he's coming back tomorrow. I'd like to give him the opportunity to visit with you, and if you have any questions for me after that, I can come back up. Thank you.
Please, President. Any questions?
Well, you made it through the first day, so that's a good sign, right, Tina? So,
Matt, if you'd like to tell them a little bit about yourself and how much you love us already.
Okay. Yeah, I guess a little bit of my background. I spent 17 years over at Morin Public Service in the water department over there. Recently, I was the services manager at the city of Fargo on the public works over there. So I guess my background has been in the utility department for, I guess, the majority of my work career. So I was able to go around the street supervisor today and just kind of see a little bit what they've done. The employees out there, from what I can see, have done an excellent job in the last few months. Kind of just really doing the best they can, and especially with this last snowstorm. I mean, they've really worked hard. I mean, they're still out there, in certain areas trying to get the lanes back and kind of do, the next about 4 or 5 days, they're really going to try and hit it hard to try and get more of those lanes open back up to get the public a little bit more area to drive, so we get those streets that are only down to 1 lane back to 2. So it's kind of a big, I don't know if you want to say a pat on the back to them for the job that they've been doing the last few months. They've done really, from what I've seen, a really great job.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Axley?
Glad to have him on board.
And
Welcome.
The only other items that I have are, if you would like to look in your packets at the end, we had 3 letters of correspondence. It was from different members of the community talking about how happy they are with the different things and the direction the city's been taking. And again, on the note of the Public Works Department, I did also take a drive before Matt had started with Dan last week, and the work that they're doing has always been phenomenal, but their determination to get this cleaned up and done has been beyond words. And all of our departments do a fantastic job, and we're proud of all of them, but these guys really stood up and they kept working until they got it done. So they wanted to make you proud, and I think they did a great job for West Fargo.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisk. Any questions of Mrs. Fisk? A number of us commissioners did ride-arounds with Dan from Public Works last week. I know Commissioner Olson and myself both did the same day. And we were on a tour for about 2 hours is what Dan and I did. And to see what they had accomplished in some of these neighborhoods where the snow drifts were 5 and 6 feet deep and they had to auger the entire streets, it was a phenomenal amount of work and hours that our employees put in. And then when this evening, when Chief Fuller was taking his oath of office, I referenced a report that was in the newspaper with regard to 15 emergency calls that our groups were, and the interdepartment working of fire, police, public works is phenomenal. During my ride around with Mr. Birnbaum, the West Fargo School District, one of their leads called Dan, and for clarification and guidance as to who was going to be doing what at one of the shared facilities. And the rapport between the two gentlemen was very matter of fact, no drama, nothing whatsoever. You do this, we'll do this, you do this, we'll do this. End of it, okay? That was the school district. A few minutes later, one of the leads at the Park District called Dan, and, you know, of course, it's coming through the radio and again, the rapport, the respect, the get the job done mentality was amazing. This weekend, Mr. Birnbaum had shared with me how he was going to cover this last weekend because of all the overtime that had taken place the week prior. And he says, I'm going to ask for volunteers. So if any of you were moving around within the community this weekend, did you see what you saw? You did. You saw augers out, you saw maintainers out, you saw dump trucks out. Those were volunteer employees because they'd already booked so many hours with regard to their work, but they're willing to help, and the city needed it. So Dan has some additional things. I'm sure that he shared that with Mr. Anvig now, that he's on board about working with some private contractors and how they're going to continue to work as hard and diligently as he can to get our community back to where the taxpayers of West Fargo would expect their streets to be in. You have to keep in mind when we have snow emergency routes, the purpose is to open it up for life and safety. And then you come back and manicure. And again, as Mrs. Fisk said, I think they have done an absolute marvelous job. But I was awfully proud to see the amount of pieces of equipment on the street on Saturday when that was on a volunteer basis. So kudos to all the departments involved in this big snow event for the work that you did. Make us all very proud. Anybody else have anything, commissioners? Okay, we're at the correspondence. Mrs. Fisk, anything for us?
Just the 3 items that are included in your packet that I discussed. Other than that, no.
Any non-agenda items? Commissioners, anything that you'd like to bring forward? What wasn't on the agenda? If not, that concludes our meeting. Could I have a motion, please, to adjourn?
So moved?
Second, thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Commissioner Olson, thank you for your second. Been moved and seconded, we stand adjourned. Have a good evening.